Right, hi everyone. Another blood evidence stream, but with a new twist. In my earlier streams on the Cielo blood evidence, all we had were the photos and the reports and my own interpretation of the stain charts, and that was it. But something's changed because I've now learned you can run documents through ChatGPT and get basic forensic analysis, pattern matching, trajectory logic, blood path reconstruction, all based purely on the evidence, not the helter skelter story. And the results were strong enough and contradictory enough that I thought they deserved their own stream. Quick disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes only. I can't independently verify the forensics the AI generates, but I can show you where the evidence doesn't line up with the official version, and that's what we're doing tonight. So let's get into it. Yes, hello everyone. You wanna see? It's chilly. It's chilly here. Yeah, I've got a blanket on as well. You can barely sit the cat sat on it. I can't move it any higher. Yes, welcome everyone. Anyway, yes, so this is just really interesting. When I actually tried this with ChatGPT, it actually is trained on forensic science textbooks and that, so you can actually take something from what it says. So yeah, I thought it would make a good show. And as soon as I said that I was going to do this, I had already made one slideshow. But as soon as I said I was going to do this, everyone came in with all the debunking of the blood evidence. So I've had to do another slideshow to show you why we can basically trust the blood typing evidence. So yeah, we'll get into that in a second. We'll get into it pretty quickly because there's now two slideshows I've got to get through. So there's quite a lot. And so another interesting development as well. George Stimson wanted to come on this show, but I said no. But I will debate him on another show because he's the main person that detracts from the porch evidence, the blood evidence of the porch at Cielo Drive. But yeah, I'll get into it pretty quickly. Yes, I said hello, haven't I? Because like I said, there's so much to read out. I'll get straight into it. So yeah, what the evidence really shows us. How does ChatGPT know? ChatGPT isn't guessing. It was trained on the same mainstream forensic science material every crime scene student is expected to learn. Think of it as having a forensic science intern who can cross-reference faster than a human and never gets tired. What it's actually trained on. During base model training, it absorbed huge amounts of publicly available material, including standard forensic science textbooks, crime scene investigation manuals, academic articles on bloodstain pattern analysis, pathology, decomposition, timelines, liver temperature interpretation, injury morphology, etc., court documents, autopsy records, criminology research, and other materials already in the public domain. So, what it's not doing, it cannot look up new information, the database, private documents, or crime lab records. It does not access police servers or archives. It only works with what's inside the base model and what you upload to it. So I basically created a project and added that to and asked the information that I gave a prompt to it as well. If you read the Substack article, I show you the exact prompt and all that I used. If you're interested, yeah, in the prompt. And I uploaded it. The homicide progress report, full scene walkthrough, blood typing table, body positions, liver temperatures, the Scientific Investigation Division blood report, G number stains, typed results for each location. Though I've since learned today, I think this is only part one of it. I think there's more to the S.I.D report than I've actually got here. The official narrative documents, Atkins grand jury testimony. I gave it a basically, yeah, just a summary of what Susan said at the grand jury to tell it to look for contradictions, basically. Chat GPT cross-checks these documents against standard forensic knowledge, known principles in blood dynamics, wound interpretation, and movement patterns, internal consistency between the files I provided. So when it says the porch stain contradicts the official sequence, or when it identifies Frykowski's two collapse points, it's doing what a trained forensic intern would do, just at machine speed. And why it matters for this stream, it means that the analysis isn't relying on memoirs, rumours, or reconstruction theories. It's based on the primary documents, standard forensic principles, direct contradictions inside the case files themselves. Exactly the kind of thing LAPD missed because they didn't have an intern working at 200 times human speed. So yeah, Is that clear to everyone, basically? So when ChatGPT, when you ask it the question, it's not searching the internet then and there to find the answer. The base model of it was trained on this information, so it's only using the base model. And in this case, I uploaded the documents to it, so it's running off the documents and what it knows from its base model. It doesn't search the internet as it's looking, unless you tell it to, unless you ask it to find stuff on the internet for you. Yeah. Yeah, oh, I've got a cold, I think, at the moment. That's probably making me sound rough. In the mic position. Where is it? So yeah, that's how it works. Right. Frykowski's final struggle, the two collapse points. The physical evidence shows Frykowski fought longer and harder than any other victim. The LAPD documented 3 major blood locations, 2 collapse points, plus the final position where he died. So first he breaks free and is shot, and he escapes the initial assault and runs towards the lawn. He is shot once in the back while fleeing. In his psychiatry report, Tate said he walked in and saw a man on the couch and he just shot him immediately inside the house. We'll get to that in a minute. LAPD, Frykowski ran in a southeasterly direction from the front porch in an effort to assist Folger. So they think one of the collapse points he was heading towards Folger, trying to help her. Collapse point 1, he falls for the first time, leaving a large separate pool of blood. LAPD said 2 large blood spots were found. Investigating officers feel these 2 large pools of blood are areas where Frykowski lay for moments in his attempt to escape. And then he gets up again. Despite the gunshot wounds, stabbing and blunt force trauma, he rises and continues fleeing. LAPD said Frykowski continued in his attempt to assist Folger. Like I said, I think he was trying to move towards Folger to help her. And collapse point 2, he collapses a second time, leaving another large pool of blood in a different location. And LAPD said it is impossible that a struggle with the assailants occurred at these 2 locations. And then he gets to his final position, and he finally is overtaken, beaten, and fatally stabbed. He is found clutching the grass. LAPD said his left hand clutched the grass where he was lying. So, in summary, Frykowski's movement path shows 3 major blood sites, collapse 1, collapse 2, and his final fall. This confirms a prolonged, chaotic struggle that contradicts any idea of a quick execution. Yes, and this is interesting. And yes, while I was going through Frykowski's autopsy report, I noticed something as well. We'll get to it. So why is there no B-type blood on the gun grip? No official document ever claims that the gun grip broke on Frykowski's head. The original location of the grip pieces was never firmly established, and officers accidentally kicked one of them before S.I.D arrived, meaning the evidence was already displaced. There is also no B-type blood on the grip at all, nothing linking it to Frykowski. Dr. G. Herrera's autopsy does describe rounded scalp contusions that could match the butt end of the revolver, but the crucial part of the head wound section, the lines where Herrera would normally identify the most likely weapon, has been partially removed. The paragraph cuts off mid-analysis, leaving only the descriptive wording and only part of the conclusion. The missing lines make it impossible to say definitively whether he was hit with just the barrel, the butt, or a separate blunt object, though he does say the handle could have done it. The homicide progress report actually contradicts the handle implication by stating the assailant struck Frykowski with the barrel of the weapon, not the grip. So the official sources don't agree. And the identifying part of the autopsy, the only section that could resolve this conflict, is the part that's gone. The blood evidence itself tells a clearer story. Frykowski's B-type blood appeared outside, only on the lawn where he collapsed. His trail never intercepts the entry area where the grip pieces were later found. Scalp wounds also bleed downward through the hair, down the face, into the clothing. They do not typically drip through onto the attacker's weapon during a moving struggle. This makes the absence of B-type blood on the grip not suspicious, but entirely consistent with the physical evidence. Taken together, the surviving autopsy text hints at the rounded object. The detectives insist on the barrel. The decisive weapon ID lines are missing, and the blood trail never reaches the grip. Nothing ties the grip pieces to Frykowski's head wounds, either medically or forensically. And if you look at this quickly, if I can get this onto, yes, this is the S.I.D report. If you look at G1, it says no blood on part of the pistol grip, because the pistol grip was in 2 parts. and one part of it had no blood on it whatsoever. So we'll get to it in a minute, but I think that the pistol grip was kicked through the blood on the porch. And yes, and look at this page from the autopsy report. I put the what the hell in there because it cuts off mid-sentence until you get the concluding paragraph where he says, could the butt of this rifle, of this gun have done it? And he says, yes, it could have been, but not certainly. And there's a whole like part here that's removed where he's discussing other possible weapons. So what the hell is that? And why the gunshot didn't leave a blood trail? This is if Tex did shoot him in the living room, like he said in the psychiatry report. Tex Watson told psychiatrists he walked in and shot Frykowski in the back while he was lying on the sofa, but the autopsy and blood evidence contradicts this. Dr. G. Herrera's report shows the gunshot wound entered Frykowski's left back and travelled upwards towards the collarbone, causing mainly internal bleeding into the chest cavity rather than external dripping. The entry wound was small, the exit wound was partly covered by clothing, and neither struck a major artery. This type of wound does not produce a visible trail when someone runs. It fills the thoracic cavity first. That's your chest cavity. The crime scene evidence matches this biology. There is no B-type blood anywhere near the sofa, no B-type stains in the front room near the entry door, and none on the porch or threshold. The first confirmed B-type stains attributed to Frykowski appear near the chair, far from the couch. So that's actually more Folger. And the only heavy Frykowski bleeding occurs outside at his two collapse points on the lawn. If he had been shot on the sofa, the upholstery rug and nearby floor would show his blood, but they do not. This pattern proves the gunshot was not a major external bleeder and cannot support Watson's version of events. The forensic trail tells a different story. Frykowski was not bleeding significantly when he began fleeing. His large blood loss happened later during the outdoor struggle, not at the moment Tex claimed he shot him. So yeah, it was basically saying if he had shot him when he was on the sofa, you'd expect some B-type blood on the sofa at least. And it's also said Susan had stabbed him in the leg before he fled. Because I wondered why no B-type blood at all on the porch if he ran across the porch while he was bleeding. And there's all this B-type blood going out the back that they attribute to Abigail Folger. But did they mix it up and did Frykowski also go out the back was what I thought. But no, apparently it is plausible because the gunshot wound would have been bleeding into his chest cavity anyway, even if he had been shot. But the forensic evidence makes it look like he was actually shot while he was outside. And what was the other thing I was saying? Sorry. That's it, yeah, and this is what we're getting at. This, if you look at the other document, this is the S.I.D. document. And yeah, if people are saying that the blood was mislabeled as well, that means he has to have mislabeled all these G1, G2, G4, G5, G6. But then all the rest are right, all the B. This is mainly Abigail Folger running out. And Stephen Parent was also type B, but his trail never seems to leave his car, so it's like he was just assaulted at his car, and there's no blood running up to his car or anything like that. But yes, it's these ones here. If he mislabeled them, it's all these, which seems unlikely. That was just an error, doesn't it? Why is there no B-type blood on the porch if Frykowski ran that way? His leg wounds were shallow. The autopsy shows no deep penetrating leg wound on Frykowski, only small superficial punctures. These don't produce immediate external dripping. His trousers absorbed the early bleeding. Shallow limb wounds often bleed into the clothing first, not into the ground. His trousers would have held the blood until they became saturated. The B-type trail that is Frykowski's only appears outside, not on the porch. The first B-type blood that can be linked to his escape appears in the grass southeast of the porch, in the two large B-type pools where he collapsed, not at the threshold on the porch surface. The porch stains are all O-type. Every type stain on the porch threshold is O or OMN, consistent with Sharon Tate or J. Sebring. Not a single porch stain is B-type. If Frykowski had a deep leg wound inside the porch, the porch would show it. A real penetrating stab wound would produce drips on the floor, drips on the threshold, drips across the porch, smeared blood where he grabbed surfaces. None of that is there. Bottom line, there is no B-type blood on the porch because Frykowski wasn't bleeding externally yet. His leg wounds were too shallow to drip during the run. The visible blood only appears after he collapses on the lawn. So it's basically saying it is plausible that he didn't drip blood as he ran across the porch if he only had these shallow leg wounds. And Tex was probably lying or wrong about shooting him when he was on the couch. That didn't actually happen. He was actually shot outside. Yeah. But it is apparently plausible that there's no B-type blood across the porch. And why is Frykowski's lawn blood not on the S.I.D sheet? The S.I.D sheet only lists stains that were typed, not every stain at the scene. Large pools right next to a victim were almost never typed because the source is already obvious. Frykowski's two major collapse pools on the East Lawn were documented in photos and described in the homicide progress report. They just weren't typed because typing them wouldn't add any investigative value. S.I.D focused on stains that showed movement or uncertainty, drops, trails, smears, and interior transfer marks. These help reconstruct the struggle and escape routes. And this is an old 1969 practice. Even today, forensic teams do not DNA test every pool of blood if the victim was lying right next to it. Modern labs only test stains that answer a specific question: identity, movement, mixture, unknown source. Pools under or beside a victim are still considered self-evident. So the absence of Frykowski's lawn pools on the S.I.D sheet is normal and expected. It's not a red flag, not a mistake, and not evidence of anything being hidden. It simply reflects the fact the sheet is a sampling log, not a full blood map. Yeah, so apparently, yeah, I would love to hear if there is anyone who watching this who happens to know of this, the answer to this. Is that true? Really, would they not have tested all the pools of blood even today if something like this had happened today and all the pools? Is that true? Because that was what it said. It said apparently if it wouldn't add investigative value, they wouldn't test the pools of blood. And I can understand them not testing a pool of blood that's under someone's body as well, because that's obvious, isn't it? Where that comes from. But would they really not test the blood today? That was what it said. It said that isn't a sign of anything being ignored or shoddy work or anything. If it doesn't add investigative value, they wouldn't test it. Yeah. Yes, and this is the picture of the gun. Look at that, because I've heard people say the barrel was bent. If you look at it, I don't know what you call it, but it looks like a pin that's running up the side of the barrel. That looks slightly bent, but the barrel doesn't look bent. And you can see there's two pieces of the gun grip, and only one part of it had blood on it. And if you were being hit with the gun, apparently it said the way head wounds bleed, it would have bled down anyway. So it's plausible wasn't blood transferred when he hit him with the gun. We don't actually know when the gun grip broke, and the LAPD reports make that very clear. The exact moment was never documented. It could have come off when Tex raised or lowered the gun, during the struggle with Jay, while moving between victims, or even after the fighting as Tex repositioned himself. Since the original position wasn't recorded and the grip pieces were kicked around by officers, we can't use the grip to reconstruct the sequence. All the grip proves is whose blood it picked up after it broke, and that blood is Jay's. Why Jay's blood could be on the grip. Jay's autopsy shows something really important. He wasn't bleeding from a cut, he was bleeding from his nose. He had blunt force trauma to the face that caused a visible nosebleed. Nosebleeds drip straight down and hit anything close to you: your hands, your clothes, the floor, any object in the middle of a struggle. Jay and Tex were fighting face to face, so transfer to Tex's hands or the gun grip is actually the most logical explanation for the OMN blood. And it was actually OMN blood on the gate, apparently, as well, which suggests someone with Jay's blood on their hands pressed the gate button, doesn't it? The gun grip doesn't tell us when it broke or who it hit. It only tells us which blood it picked up after it broke, and that was Jay's. When you factor in Jay's nosebleed, the close quarters struggle, and the grip possibly being kicked through OMN blood, the presence of Jay's blood makes perfect sense. The complete absence of B-type blood tells us the break didn't happen on Wojciech. Yeah, by LAPD's own admission, the grip pieces were kicked around. The LAPD's own report admits officers kicked the pistol grip pieces. Nobody owned up to it. That means the chain of custody on that grip is already damaged. If the grip moved across the porch before S.I.D documented it, then the blood on it could have come from anywhere it rolled through, especially Jay's blood on the porch. Yeah, and this was a question I had to ask it as well, because how did they know whose blood it was where Folger and Frykowski had the same blood type? Right? Even though Frykowski and Folger both had BMN blood, the LAPD could still tell their stains apart because of their movements. They were completely different. Frykowski collapsed twice on the east lawn, leaving two large B-type pools. Folger did bleed inside the house. A B-type stains appear by the chair in the living room, in the hallway, leading towards Sharon's bedroom, G11, and at the rear bedroom doorway, where she exited towards the pool area, G12. From there, investigators followed a continuous trail of her blood down the back steps, G14, and along the pathway, G15, before she collapsed on the north lawn. Because both she and Frykowski were B-type, investigators distinguished their movements geographically rather than chemically. The interior hallway and east lawn B-type stains were assigned to Frykowski, while the B-type trail out on the back bedroom and the north lawn pooling were assigned to Folger, based entirely on their documented escape routes and the position of their bodies. Because in those days they didn't have DNA tests, did they? So they couldn't tell the blood apart. All they could tell is if it was human or animal and what type it was. So yeah, but they told them apart by the movement pattern, basically. Oh, and there's this, people bring up this in court, the guy talking about the Octoloni test and saying it was done weeks or months later. The blood typing people argue about, the O, OMN, and BMN results, was done immediately. That's how we have the S.I.D G number sheet from the very first day. What was done later were the slow species confirmation tests, which only tells you if a stain is human or animal. These are completely separate from the ABO and MN tests. So when people claim the blood work was delayed, they're mixing up two different procedures. The weeks or months later comment from the testimony refers to the Octoloni test, which is an immunodiffusion test used in the 1960s. It doesn't identify individuals, it doesn't type blood, and it doesn't affect the G number results. It's simply a species test, human versus animal, and it's slow by design. This delay is normal for the time period and has nothing to do with the victim blood types being identified. Because, yeah, something has to sit in a petri jar for ages for them to perform this test. That's why the test takes weeks. And it's not the same test as the test that took the blood types, basically. And why the ABO-MN results are reliable. Despite the scene issues, the actual ABO and MN typing is consistent across every document. The S.I.D sheet matches the autopsies exactly. Frykowski is B, Sebring is OMN, and Tate is OM. These types don't overlap. That means you can't accidentally swap them. The porch OMN stains match J, the outdoor B-type stains match Frykowski and Folger, and Tate's OM matches the door. Whatever else LAPD got wrong, the blood types themselves line up. Even if the blood samples had sat for days or weeks, it wouldn't change the typing. ABO and MN antigens survive for years in dried stains. Labs type old blood all the time in cold cases. If a stain was degraded, the test would come back inconclusive. It wouldn't change from B to O or anything like that. The S.I.D results were clean and they matched the autopsies exactly, which tells us the stains were stable and correctly typed. Paperwork can be sloppy, antigen chemistry is not. So basically, yeah, even if they were shoddy about it and they left them sitting around for weeks before they tested it and stuff like that, they use these in cold cases. They can still sample blood that's like 50 years old and get the blood type from it. That doesn't matter as well. Yeah, we'll get to more that's wrong with it though. One thing the LAPD openly admits is that officers walked through the scene and kicked evidence, including the gun grip pieces. That's contamination from the first minutes of the investigation. Add to that the fact that media were on site early, taking photographs before full forensic processing, and you've got a scene that wasn't properly secured. That doesn't change the blood typing, but it does weaken everything around it. Once the initial scene was mismanaged, the documentation gaps become even more important. That's because I didn't know this until I was researching this. Press photographers reached the property before LAPD fully secured the perimeter. TV crews and newspaper photographers were on Benedict Canyon within minutes, and officers prioritized searching the house over locking down the crime scene. Sharon Tate's body was photographed by the press through the living room window with a long lens camera. This image, showing Tate on the floor with the rope, is not an LAPD photo. It was taken before the interior was completely processed. Frykowski and Folger were also photographed outside before removal. Foreign papers published these images within days, confirming the media had line of sight into the lawn before LAPD had finished documenting outdoor blood patterns. LAPD admitted scene movement, grip pieces were kicked, evidence displaced, and object positions had to be reconstructed from memory. This tells us the perimeter was not properly controlled during the early hours of the investigation. Press photographing the bodies before stain mapping means the porch, entryway, and lawn blood evidence was exposed to contamination and unrecorded movement. So the blood typing is consistent, but the scene control was not. The early presence of the media is one of the clearest indicators that the first phase of forensic work was chaotic, rushed, and vulnerable to disturbance. So I did not know that. Before they had even locked down the house, the press were in there and they took a picture of Sharon Tate's body through the window with a long lens, and they took photos of Frykowski and Folger on the lawn before the place was locked down. Just shocking, isn't it? How these murders have been exploited by the media. They were in there before the police had even locked the place down, taking pictures of Sharon Tate. Yeah, evidence had to be reconstructed as well. The investigators had to hold meetings to figure out where objects had been at the time they arrived, because the original positions weren't documented thoroughly. Any scene that needs reconstruction is already compromised. It means we're relying on memory instead of, of contemporaneous notes. The position of the grip, the ropes, even some stain interpretations, are based partly on officers' recollection, not precise documentation. And there was no time-stamped sample collection. The reports don't say when each bloodstain was lifted, sealed, or transported. Modern forensics works logs every time a piece of evidence changes hands. In 1969, they weren't as strict, but the lack of timestamp still creates weak points in the chain of custody. If someone wants to argue contamination or mix-ups could have happened, this is where they point, not the blood types themselves. And the G number sheet lists every type stain, but the crime scene photos don't show these labels, so we have to infer which stain in a photo matches which G number. Most of the time it lines up well enough, but the documentation isn't perfect. Any ambiguity like that gives critics room to argue mislabeling, even if the actual types still match the victims. And the phone line cutting point, the gate button and the fence area weren't properly photographed before officers interacted with them. One officer panicked and fled, pressing the gate button before a lift could be taken. So blood on the button was noted after handling, which undermines any interpretation of how it got there. Again, this doesn't affect the victim's blood typing, but it does show that a lot of the early crime scene work was sloppy and reactive. Because, yeah, that's another thing, isn't it? I've seen it in a documentary. I think it's The Final Word. They interview one of the police on scene and he admits, yeah, that he ran out and pressed the gate button to get out because he was having a panic attack sort of thing. Can't blame him. I've spoken harshly, but yeah, this must have been awful to see like nothing they'd ever seen before. I have more sympathy for him now. The real issues aren't with the blood typing. The problems are the scene handling, poor documentation, and contamination during the first minutes. Those errors don't invalidate the typing, but they do weaken parts of the official story, especially the confidence in original object placement and movement. We can confirm whose blood is where, but not the exact sequence of how everything happened. Could the blood types be wrong? Only if they were mislabeled. Contamination can move or smear blood, but it cannot change ABO or MN antigens. Standing in it, dragging it, kicking evidence, or letting the press near it does not turn B into O or O into B. The only way the lab results could be wrong is if the samples were mislabeled, swapped, or deliberately tampered with. That means human error or intentional evidence manipulation, not chemistry. And because LAPD did not timestamp the collection for each stain, no start-end times, no chain of custody clocking, it's impossible to verify the exact moment each sample changed hands. This is the biggest procedural weakness in the case. Lack of timestamps does not imply tampering, but it makes tampering or mislabeling impossible to rule out definitively. It creates uncertainty where there shouldn't be any. Was timestamping standard in 1969? Not really. Clocking every transfer of evidence is a modern forensic standard. In 1969, LAPD often recorded only the date, not the time, when packaging the stains, which is why this case has chain of custody gaps by today's standards. So the blood types themselves are reliable, but the documentation around them is not. The science is solid, the paperwork isn't, and that ambiguity is enough to make people suspicious. right? And contamination doesn't change blood type. Nothing you do at a crime scene, stepping in it, kicking evidence around, letting the press photograph it, can turn type B stain into type O. The only way the typing could be wrong is if the samples were mislabeled or manipulated. And because LAPD didn't timestamp the collection and sealing of each stain, there is no way to trace the exact path of each piece of evidence. So it doesn't mean tampering happened, but it means it can't be ruled out either. In 1969, the lack of timestamping wasn't unusual, but today it would be unacceptable. So the typing results are solid, but the chain of custody paperwork is where the cracks are. And who actually collected the blood? Patrol officers caused the early contamination, stepping in blood, touching the gate button, and kicking the gun grip pieces. But these officers were not the ones who collected the blood samples. All stains were collected, labelled, packaged, and G-numbered by trained S.I.D forensic technicians, men like Granado, Bowen, and Dorman, following standard 1969 procedures, one sample at a time, pre-labelled envelopes, and sealed evidence packets. Scene contamination effects where blood ends up, not its type. Only S.I.D mislabeling, accidental or deliberate, could produce incorrect typings. Lack of timestamps reflects 1969 protocol, not sabotage, but it does create gaps where mislabeling cannot be ruled out with modern certainty. So the problem isn't the blood types, they are consistent. The problem is how LAPD handled the scene. The blood types themselves are solid, they match across the autopsies and the S.I.D sheet, but the scene was handled badly. Evidence moved, grip pieces kicked, samples undocumented, and photos lacking labels. So if people feel unsure about the official timeline, that doubt comes from the sloppy procedures, not the science. The forensic typing is reliable, the scene management wasn't. Yeah. So that's, yeah, just to clear up for people that are skeptical about the quality of the blood results. Basically, yes, there were a lot of problems with the crime scene, but none of that would have affected the blood type results. The only way it could have gone wrong is if he mislabeled it. And to have, I showed you this before, didn't I? But look, if you do this, no, remove you. It would have to be all those from what G1 to G7 that he mislabeled. And if they were going to deliberately tamper with the evidence, why would they make it contradict the timeline, the official narrative so much? You know what I mean? Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they make it match, make all that B type blood? Because that makes more sense. Because Linda Kasabian said she saw Frykowski stumble over the porch. So if they were going to falsify the evidence, why wouldn't they make that all B type blood? And if he mislabeled all that's like about 5 samples, he suddenly mislabels. So everything else appears to tally up with Folger running out the back and Frykowski fleeing over the lawn. So it's like that's a lot of mistakes for him to make, isn't it? Yeah, basically. And then we can finally get on to the second slideshow. The original slideshow I had planned before I had to do that. But yeah, I hope that's interesting. And yeah, like I say, I don't show pictures of the bodies on my streams. I'm thinking about maybe putting them into Substack articles because sometimes it is hard to find specific pictures. Certainly show you have a choice whether you see them or not. But yeah, if you look at Jay Sebring's autopsy report, where his crimes, his autopsy photos and that, you can see definitely he was bleeding from his nose. So that is possibly why there was blood all over Tex as he handled the gun grip, the gun, and that's why Tex is. But the fact that there's 2 parts to the gun grip and only one part of it had blood on it makes me think maybe it got booted through the blood on the porch by the police. Yeah, and you can't really rely on the gun grip for anything as evidence because it got kicked around so much. Because I think people trying to debunk the porch blood rely too much on the gun grip. The gun grip is not really reliable evidence of anything, so it got kicked around so much. And the fact that one part has no blood on it makes me think, yeah, it didn't happen because as the gun was being used as a weapon, the blood getting on that part of the gun grip. That's my conclusion, and that was what the AI seemed to be pointing towards, wasn't it? I think, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Don't believe a single word that Linda Kasabian has ever said outside of "I really like methamphetamine." Yeah, that's it. I've got to watch a documentary as well where she narrates it. That's going to be a bit of a head F. Watching that, yeah, knowing everything I know about Linda Kasabian now, it's good, and it's called something like "The Night We Killed Sharon Tate," and bloody Linda Kasabian's narrating it. That would be crazy. Yeah, but that's coming up in the coming weeks. Me analysing all these documentaries. But yeah, let's go on with the second slideshow now. Otherwise we'll be here all night. This stream uses blood pattern analysis, movement reconstruction, and liver temperature data to rebuild the real sequence of events at Cielo Drive. Instead of repeating the courtroom mythology, we're examining the physical evidence as it exists in the reports, the photographs, and the G-numbered bloodstains. What emerges is a crime scene that looks nothing like the helter-skelter version, and a sequence of events that the official story cannot explain. This reconstruction is built primarily on physical evidence, the LAPD first homicide progress report, the S.I.D blood report with G-numbered stains, and the liver temperature data, and the crime scene photographs from the S.I.D report, plus one unnumbered photo of O blood on the walkway. Those were the pictures I gave it. These are the foundation of the timeline and movement analysis. We also reference the official narrative, the versions told by Susan Atkins in her grand jury testimony and Linda Kasabian at trial, but only for one purpose, to check where their claims align with the forensics and where they contradict the physical record. The reconstruction itself does not rely on their statements. It relies solely on blood types, stain distribution, movement patterns, and environmental data. This approach allows the evidence to speak without the influence of courtroom storytelling or shifting witness memories. The contradictions we find emerge organically from the scene itself. Right, the blood type is the backbone of movement tracking in this case. Sharon Tate's blood is type OM, J. Sebring is type OMN, both Frykowski and Folger are B-type, and Parent was B-type. Because each victim has a distinct profile, we can follow their precise path through the house and garden. The stains don't lie. Once you understand which blood type belongs to which victim, the crime scene begins to tell its own story. And that story is very different from the one Vincent Bugliosi pushed into the public imagination. For the OM and OMN bloods, blood type casualties, sorry, let me read that again. For the OM and OMN blood type casualties, J. Sebring and Sharon Tate, the earliest injuries occurred outside, not inside the living room. G4 shows Sharon Tate's blood flowing outward from the threshold into the porch stones. The flow direction proves she was bleeding outside while still alive. G5 is an even more significant finding, a large pool of J. Sebring's blood at the edge of the porch, flowing to the front of the porch, and the bush that LAP documented as crushed as if someone had lain there. These stains cannot be reconciled with the claim that the victims were calmly assembled inside the house. The physical evidence shows the attack began on the front porch, before any victim was moved indoors. So yeah, when a computer analyzes this according to forensic science textbook, it says it looks like the attack of J. Sebring and Sharon Tate entirely began outside before they came inside. Tate outside the house. The unnumbered photo of the type O stain on the walkway, blood on walkway 28 inches from front porch and 8 inches north edge of OMN walkway human blood, is one of the strongest contradictions in the entire case. Its directional tell indicates that Sharon Tate was moving while bleeding, several feet away from the porch. This alone destroys the narrative that Tate was held inside for the entire attack and never escaped till reached the door. The stain is an active blood loss marker, not a transfer. It proves Tate got outside, was on her feet, and was bleeding while moving. This cannot fit the helter-skelter timeline, where Tate remains immobilized in the living room from beginning to end. Detailed Sebring flow interpretation. G5 is a large high-volume blood pool originating close to the wall of the house and flowing downward toward the front edge of the porch, not into the hedge. The thinning and direction of the flow mark the direction of the flow marks show gravity pulling the blood toward the step, which means the source point was higher up the slab. The hedge directly above the stain shows crushed and snapped twigs, consistent with the body either collapsing into it or being pressed against it. But the blood itself flowed away from the hedge towards the porch edge. This indicates the injured person, almost certainly Sebring, given the OMN typing, was positioned against or near the hedge when arterial bleeding occurred. The flow pattern shows the attack happened on the porch, not inside, and the volume shows Sebring was gravely wounded here before ever entering the house. This directly contradicts the helter-skelter claim that he was killed quickly in the living room. And forced movement into the house. After the porch assault, the victims were walked back into the house after sustaining significant injuries. Tate's blood appears in the entry hall after the outdoor stains, indicating movement into the house while already bleeding. Sebring's blood on the trunks confirms he encountered them after the outdoor wound that caused the G5 pull. The downward direction of the stain shows his blood was transferred onto the trunks at a later stage, but it does not tell us whether he was conscious, upright, dragged, or repositioned. What this does prove is that the movement inside was not voluntary, and it was not the calm assembly of victims described in the helter-skelter narrative. The victims did not begin the attack inside the living room. They arrived there already injured, and the scene shows physical relocation rather than orderly herding. And more about the trunks. Sebring's G29 stain on the steamer trunks shows that he had already suffered substantial blood loss before making contact with them. The blood runs downward and is consistent with transfer from an already bleeding wound, not fresh bleeding caused inside the living room. This means he was brought into the living room after his porch injuries, and the trunks were an obstacle or placement point in that process. This does not mean Sebring was alive at the exact moment he contacted the trunks, only that his blood was deposited there after the porch assault. The important contradiction is that the state claimed Sebring died quickly inside the living room, yet the forensics show he was bleeding heavily outside before he was ever positioned near the trunks. The G7 footprint is a barefoot stepped in fresh O-type blood, and it moves away from the house. Since Joe Sebring had shoes on, this footprint cannot belong to him. We also know Susan Atkins was barefoot that night, which means this footprint could belong to her rather than a victim. However, even if the print belongs to Atkins, the forensic contradiction remains someone stepped in fresh O-type blood, specifically Sharon Tate's or Joe Sebring's blood, outside on the porch, while the blood was still wet. If the footprint is Tate's, it proves she was upright and escaping. If it is Atkins, it proves Atkins was outside, stepping in the victim's blood, at a time when the state claims the victims were still in the living room under control. Either way, the footprint supports the porch first attack, not an indoor, only helter-skelter timeline. And yeah, I wanted to add, I was surprised when it started saying that. It started saying it started assuming the footprint was Tate's, and I had to tell it no. It's always assumed that that's Susan Atkins' footprint because she was barefoot. But the AI was saying it could be Sharon Tate's footprint. I'd never thought of that, but yeah, it could be her in her own blood as well. Horrible, but it's moving away from the house, not towards the house. So it's as she's walking away, bleeding, possibly from whatever happened at the porch, at the door. The sort of the splatter around the door. Folger's true escape path. Yeah, this is because when I gave it, because what Susan Atkins says about Abigail Folger's death is really weird and evasive. She makes out Abigail Folger was killed in the living room, and Billy O.C. has to ask her, well, how did she get out on the lawn then? And she says, oh, I can't remember, but I remember us all standing around and looking at her dead on the lawn. So, and I think it was probably just because she didn't want to snitch on Krenwinkel because she still had to share a cell with her, didn't she? She was pretty terrified of Krenwinkel herself, wasn't she, having seen what she'd done? But yeah, so it says this. But this is actually pretty well known. This was not a secret. Abigail Folger's escape path is mapped by B-type stains, beginning in the living room and moving into the hallway. G10 and G11 show her bleeding deeper into the house, not toward the front door. G12 places her in the master bedroom. G13 and G14 show she reached the pool door and back steps. G15 marks her final collapse onto the lawn. This is a detailed multi-stage escape through the back of the house. It contradicts Atkins' claim that Folger ran towards the front lawn, through the front door. The stains form a coherent path, and it is the opposite of what was reported at trial, or at the grand jury. And yeah, I didn't look too heavily into exactly what. Linda Kasabian claimed not to be in the house, didn't she? She claimed to only see Frykowski come running out the house. So yeah, I can't even remember what she said about Folger. I should look into that bit. And Frykowski's struggle across the lawn. We spoke more about that in the other slideshow, obviously, didn't we? Frykowski's B-type trials and pulls indicate a chaotic outdoor struggle with multiple collapse points. The pattern outside suggests he was attacked near the porch, fled or staggered down the lawn, fell, got up again, and fell repeatedly. This reflects a prolonged fight, not the short, clean pursuit described in court. These stains reveal a dynamic struggle lasting far longer than the helter-skelter narrative suggests. They also show that Frykowski was outdoors much earlier in the sequence than claimed. Yeah, and I made it do a whole slide devoted to Stephen Parent because, yeah, he gets so overlooked. Stephen Earl Parent, 18, deserves a dedicated section because he is consistently sidelined in both the official narrative and later retellings. Yet his death contains some of the clearest forensic contradictions in the entire case. Who he was a high school graduate, class of 1969, worked 2 jobs, ambitious streetwise, saving for electronics school, at Cielo Drive that night, simply to sell a clock radio to the caretaker, or so they say. Why his death matters in the reconstruction. His killing does not match the helter-skelter timeline. His actions show panic and awareness, not passive compliance. His vehicle's final position shows a frantic escape attempt, not a calm execution. Though the Manson family moved his vehicle again, didn't they, after he was dead? The key forensic points. Blood type BMN matches only himself inside the car. His liver temperature was 92 Fahrenheit, not the temperature of someone killed first in the linear sequence. His liver temperature was the same as Abigail Folger's, as well, if you look at the documents. Defensive wound, deep palm laceration that severed tendons and broke his watch band. His watch was found in the back seat, wasn't it? Vehicle behaviours, reverse turn, fence strike, cement scrapes, all signs of sudden danger. Isolation of blood. No victim blood near the car except his, confirming his killing was a separate, chaotic encounter. While this contradicts the official story, the prosecution needed Parent to be the clean first kill to uphold its tidy timeline. But the forensic picture shows he was terrified, not passive. He was reacting to something already happening. His struggle does not precede the violence inside in any meaningful, controlled way. Stephen Parent wasn't an incidental footnote. He was a victim who fought back, tried to escape, and whose death exposed how artificial the official timeline really is. So that's interesting. It said, yeah, that it doesn't think as well that Stephen Parent died first. Basically, it said the evidence makes it look like he died during the incident. So I found that interesting because that's what a lot of people think who've looked at this for a long time. Don't believe the story that he died first and was on his way out. Expanded liver temperature analysis. Liver temperatures can be affected by environment, and this scene has important environmental differences. Tate and Sebring were indoors in cold stone, which accelerates cooling, and Frykowski and Folger were outdoors, exposed to sunlight and warmer surfaces, and Parent was in his car. However, even after adjusting for these factors, the 8 to 10 degree temperature gap remains too large to dismiss. Tate at 82 Fahrenheit and Sebring at 83 Fahrenheit suggest significantly earlier deaths than Folger at 92 Fahrenheit. Combined with the porch blood sequence, the liver temperatures fit a different timeline. Tate and Sebring were injured first, not last. The prosecution avoided these measurements for a reason. Because I actually read about this, I think it was Delinda Haynes actually drew our attention to this. The liver temperatures seem off. But at the time when I looked into it, the answer came back sort of no, there's too much more that they would use to predict time of death than just the liver temperature, and there's too many outer factors, so I didn't talk about it. But yeah, the AI said the gap is so big that it shouldn't be ignored completely. And I found it really interesting that Stephen Parent is the same temperature as Abigail Folger. And yeah, 10 degrees different. But so this is just a completely different sequence of events. Sharon and Tate dying first. Sharon and Sebring dying first. And Folger and Frykowski still being alive. And I didn't talk about it for a long time because I thought, yeah, there was too much else to disprove it. But yeah, the AI said it is worth mentioning, basically. When you combine blood flow direction, stain distribution, body temperature, and collapse points, a consistent sequence appears. Porch assault, Tate and Sebring injured first. Victims forced indoors while bleeding. Sebring collapses near trunks. Frykowski escapes outside, multiple collapse points. Folger flees through the house, pool doors, then lawn. Folger dies on lawn. Tate likely dies earlier or mid-sequence, not last. This reconstructed timeline is the only one consistent with all the stains and temperatures. So that was the timeline ChatGPT itself came up with after that, yeah. After seeing the evidence. So yeah, that's the end of all the slideshows. And cool, we are nearly up to an hour already. Yeah, I was like, oh, it zoomed right in on me for some reason. Can I get to zoom out? There you go. There. So yeah, was that clear to everyone? because there was so much to read out. I didn't really interact with the chat much during that, did I? Sorry about that. Didn't mean to ignore you. But yeah, people don't seem to be too cynical, do they? Yeah. And well, the important thing that I learned from that was basically the blood typing results actually look reliable. And if you do, the only way to criticise it is you cannot completely rule out mislabeling because the lack of time stamping and all that, and the 1969 standards are different. But that doesn't automatically mean something went wrong. But you can't rule it out entirely. But if he did make a mistake, he has to have messed up only those 5 samples, and everything else seems to add up. So the weight of that seems to collapse under itself. And also, if you were going to tamper with the evidence, surely you would make all that B-type blood, because that makes more sense. Because Frykowski ran outside, and you wouldn't want people to know Sharon and Jay got outside, if you were trying to cover something up, would you? This is like an anomaly that really messes up Bugliosi's timeline, isn't it? And what are the chances if you just mislabeled them? He mislabeled all 5 of those and labeled everything else right. So I think we can rely on it. And yeah, let me know how you feel about the Chat GPT analysis, because I've got a whole custom GPT now with all the Manson case things, so I can ask it all sorts of questions. I could even do it live on air and stuff like that 1 week. So yeah, we can ask it questions together, and you can see how it responds. Because it gets stuff wrong as well. You have to correct it because it kept getting confused about all the B-type blood. It kept saying Frykowski ran out the back down the hall because of the B-type blood. It got confused even. I had to keep correcting it. So yeah, you can't entirely trust it. you have to know the case that you put into it well. I wouldn't get it to independently analyze a case you know nothing about and just totally take its results. Yeah, I haven't asked it about that yet. But yeah, this is the kind of thing I could do. I could ask it questions like, yeah, because I could give it the text because he talked about it in books, so I can give it Manson's anecdote about going back and say, does any of the forensic evidence support this, and see what it says, couldn't I? Yeah. But I didn't ask it about that on this occasion. I was just asking it about how reliable is the blood evidence. And then when people started to say they were questioning it, and they were talking about Stimson's debunking of the porch blood evidence, I realised I'd have to show, yeah, how actually he's not quite right. Though you can question it, the only way it could be wrong is if it got mislabeled. Basically, they couldn't have got the test wrong, and it doesn't matter if the test sat for weeks before it got done or anything like that, because they can do these tests on cold case blood. It's not. An Octoloni test take weeks anyway, so that's why that said it took months or weeks. So like, there's nothing about the way they appear to have processed them that suggests they fucked it up in any way. Mm. Yeah, well, that's what it said, didn't it? It was saying that the liver temperature shows Steve Parent died during, not before, and here he has the same liver temperature as Abigail Folger, and it also appears to show that Sharon Tate and Joe Sebring died first. But I was cynical about that because of they were lying on cold stone. But ChatGPT said the difference is so significant it is worth mentioning. Though they take more things like the lividity of the body and the state of rigor mortis, and apparently the liver temperatures were taken outside of the zone to reliably predict time of death. That's why you don't get a time of death prediction. Yeah. Yeah, almost like helter skelter to just the narrative, the official narrative, what is written in the book, and what these people are actually convicted of as well. That's the important thing to remember. These 2 ones that are still alive are still convicted of this to this day. And looking at it, it's really, really kind of unsound, isn't it? Yeah. That's it. So yeah, when we say helter skelter, we mean the narrative as Bugliosi told it and as it was told in court, basically. Yeah, and the sequence of events, it doesn't add up because the sequence of events that Susan Atkins and Linda Sabine give us is it happened really quite rapidly. The Frykowski, I can't say his name now. Frykowski and Folger ran out onto the lawn and were killed, and then Sharon and Jay were killed, both inside the living room, never left the living room. But then when you look at the blood evidence, there was loads of Sharon and Jay's blood out on the porch as well. So what the hell was going on there? This is everyone's problem. And there's people that have tried to say, oh, they've screwed up the evidence somehow. But you cannot basically screw up these tests. The only way it could be wrong is if they mislabeled it. And if they mislabeled it accidentally, then they accidentally mislabeled 5 samples, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? And also, you can't really rely on the gun grip for anything because only part of the gun grip had blood on it anyway, which suggests it didn't get on it while someone was being hit with it or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. Well, at the penalty phase, Susan Atkins admitted that Bugliosi showed her diagrams and told her what to say. She couldn't bloody remember. So she was told what to say by Bugliosi before she even testified at the grand jury. It's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, if you look at I think I have got a picture, not ready to show on this stream, but I have got a picture of just the pool of Sharon's blood. Yeah. I think that she was finally stabbed after being moved back into the house, and her fatal wound was inside the house. But if you look at Jay, there's not a lot of blood around Jay. And there's no blood splatter for Jay all over the room. Where's all the blood splatter for these people if they were stabbed that much in the living room? There isn't a lot of blood splattered around the living room. There's a bit of Folgers, and there's the pool under Sharon, which they never typed, but apparently that isn't unusual because they wouldn't even today if there's a big pool of blood under a dead body of a person that's been stabbed to death. It's like a no shit Sherlock situation, isn't it? That's her blood, so they wouldn't have tested it even today, apparently. Yeah, yeah, that's it. If any of them are still alive, yeah, yeah. And like I say, I've always thought that ever since I saw the size of the stain and I looked at how little blood there is around him, I've always thought, yeah, he was already dead and they moved him inside. Yeah. Right, yeah, we're literally up to an hour now. Thanks for coming, everyone. We'll go to an after show, so I want to try and get a bit of an early night tonight. But yeah, and let me know if you're watching this on playback in the comments. How do you feel about the AI analysis of stuff? I'll always tell you if what I'm getting I've got from the AI analysis. But yeah, I've already asked it stuff about everything because I gave it all the. I've got a custom GPT now with all the files, all the LaBianca reports, and it's got all the autopsy reports. And I asked it straight away, "Do you see anything people don't talk about?" And it came out with a load of stuff about the LaBiancas and the evidence not supporting that the buttocks wounds on Rosemary LaBianca were inflicted after she was dead. So the forensic evidence actually supports what Leslie said at the penalty phase about she did stab Rosemary LaBianca while she was alive, because the forensic evidence suggests she was stabbed while she was still crawling across the room. So yeah, that was quite surprising as well. I'd like to talk about that because a lot of people have just blindly believed that Leslie was forced to stab a corpse and never stabbed anyone, really. But apparently the forensic evidence shows that yeah, someone was stabbing her while she was crawling. Oh, do you like the shorts? Do you? Yeah, they get quite a lot of views, or some of them do. The thing is, watch time is important as well, and where they're so short, they screw up your watch time because they're usually less than a minute long or a minute long, aren't they? Though you can make them slightly longer now. They're not good for the watch time, but yeah, it does get yeah. I was trying to people into trying that knife stealing dog to drag the wedding present knives down the path. Yeah, yeah. And Bugliosi said in How to Skelter that when he took her back to the house to reconstruct the crimes, when she saw the guard dogs, she started crying and said, "Why couldn't they have been here that night?" Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that's it. Well, they started fighting on the porch, and Sharon starts to run or whatever. Jay might have back text back to the porch, you say, yeah. Because he did have some kung fu training, didn't he? Maybe he tried to do some kung fu or whatever out of desperation, but yeah. Tex was like really athletic and bigger than him and high on meth and God knows what, brain damaged by Datura and all that. He didn't have a chance, really, did he, against him? Yeah, that's it. He might have tried to fight back a bit, and obviously he got the crap kicked out of him, poor man. And yeah, and it's uncertain as well whether he got the nosebleed while he was stood up, because that's the other thing about yeah how Jay's blood could have got on the gun. Realistically, is yeah because if they were fighting close to close, the blood dripping down would have got on Tex and would have got on the gun grip. Yeah, I found it interesting. Only one part of the gun grip had blood on it, which shows that maybe that didn't come from someone being hit with the gun. It came from the blood being kicked. Like I said repeatedly. Yeah. Bug was probably already thinking that, why weren't they there? Like, not lying. Yeah, it would be great for the movie version, yeah. He pretty made it up, didn't he? She probably never said that. Yeah. Yeah, well, this is the thing. You still wonder why they just surrendered to Susan. Basically, yeah. I won't read out everything he said, but yeah. The implication is they knew them, and they had come round, and they'd actually were invited. They'd rung up and said, yeah, we're coming round, and something broke out. That's the thing. It's just we've totally been misled about the fact they didn't know the victims. They did know the victims. We're told that they were strangers. But I think they went there not intending to kill everyone. They were just going to try and rob them. They were going to like scare them and try and rob them. But shit got out of control. And once they had killed one person, they had to kill everyone because they were all witnesses, you know. And there's this whole thing about Manson forcing everyone to get blood on their hands because he had got paranoid about Bernard Crowe. If that is true, imagine how Manson must have felt when he realised Bernard Crowe wasn't dead as well. He'd made all the kids go out and do this to get blood on their hands, and Bernard Crowe hadn't even died. My God, imagine that. If it is true. Hmm. Yeah, no, it is Susan in the official narrative who goes round the house and rounds everyone up and brings them into the living room. So she saw Abigail and Jay and Susan, Jay and Sharon. Abigail waved at her, but yeah, she also is supposed to have rounded up everyone. And as soon as Jay walks into the living room, Sharon and Jay walk into the living room, Tex tells Sharon to lay down on the ground, and Tex is supposed to shoot Jay then, and the girls close in and stab him, and he's supposed to die in the living room, isn't he? But where's the blood splatter for all that? And why is there no blood pool around him? If you look at him, there's hardly any blood around him. Yet there's this huge pool of his blood out on the porch. Makes you question it, doesn't it? Yeah. Yeah. This is the thing. Were they trying to run away? They were probably trying to escape, weren't they? They were running out of the house. This is the thing. They didn't herd them out. They were trying to run, and they stopped them. Because people speculate that they were trying to take them to Jay's house. They were heading to Jay's car, and something went wrong, or whatever. But I think they were probably just trying to leg it out the house because they realised they were going to, maybe they had been cut slightly in the house or whatever, and they were scared and they were trying to run. I think they were just trying to get away. And I think the sad thing about this is the official narrative puts Sharon like meekly just begging for her life, doesn't she? And she doesn't try to escape or try to fight. And this shows that she did try to put up a fight and she tried to escape. That's why I think it's sad they play down this and people try to discredit this because it shows Sharon was fighting. Yeah. Yeah, and the collapsed bush as well. There's just so much there, isn't there? And like I say, I don't show the photos on the stream, but it's quite easy to find the photos of Jay and Sharon on the ground in the living room, and there doesn't look to be a lot of blood around Jay. Though there is a big pool of blood around Sharon, as if she did get her final wound to the chest that caused her to bleed out inside the living room. Hmm. Yeah. This is it. Yeah, well, this is what Bobby tells us, isn't it? But then Bobby goes and says stupid shit like, and he sent him to Cielo Drive to kill Melcher, even though it's documented they knew Melcher didn't live. It said in court, Rudy Altabelli tells them in court that Manson knew Terry Melcher didn't live there. And he was trying to find out where Melcher did live. But yeah, this is what Bobby says, that Manson got paranoid and wanted everyone to get blood on their hands so that they couldn't snitch, basically. Yeah. 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 Right, well, this has gone on for over an hour now, so I'll end this and I'll go to an after show. Thanks for coming, everyone. And like I say, if you're watching this on playback, let me know if you want to see more of the AI analysis, if you find it interesting, or if you'd rather I didn't do it because you don't trust it or whatever, let me know. So I'm sure people will with the watch time this gets and the amount of views it gets. Yeah. Thanks for coming, everyone, and come to the after show if you're coming. Oh, so just seen that before I finish it. Yeah, I don't think Parent was killed first. A lot of us have always suspected that Steve Parent actually saw something happening and was fleeing and then was killed. A lot of us don't believe Parent was killed first. Excellent. Yeah. That's it. And maybe next week George Stimson's coming on. I don't know if that will pan out, but yeah, that will be interesting, won't it? Me debating George Stimson. Excellent. Right. I'll see you in the after show or next week. Thanks for coming.